Today at shopdap.com, we'll be talking about how to install a water pump and a thermostat on an MQB 2.0 or 1.8T. Okay, so you have a Mark 7 or an MQB 2.0T or 1.8T engine. The only common problem at this point that we're aware of is going to be this assembly right here. This thermostat housing is prone to leaking. So this job that we're about to show you is something that is going to be a common failure and something you're going to want to look at while you're dealing with one of these cars. We're going to show you how to diagnose that leak and where to look for it in just a second. To identify if you have a leak, the first thing you want to do is open your hood. Now, you can smell under the hood to see if you have any sweet smelling vapors coming from generally going to be this area right here. Now, the thermostat and water pump is located underneath this intake manifold right here. Now, because we can't see much from the top, we're going to go from the bottom and show you how to look from there. We're going to drop this lower splash shield. There's just some Torx screws that hold it on so that we can inspect the front area here. We take a flathead screwdriver, we're going to put it right here under these tabs, and then we're going to slide this sucker out. So where we're going to be looking is going to be right here between the engine and transmission, kind of a little bit to the left towards the engine, and you're going to be looking straight up. This hose right here that's unclipped on our car goes up to that thermostat assembly. Now let's take a closer look. As you can see here, between the water pump and the thermostat housing is pink crusty stuff at the lower part of it. That's where we see our coolant leak. So yours is probably not going to be leaking here. This is not the most common point to leak. We believe this thermostat housing's already been replaced. So yours is going to leak more by the thermostat housing itself, which would be to the left. What you see here is the kits that we put together for this job. 2 gallons of coolant. This stuff comes pre-mixed. The thermostat housing, the water pump, intake manifold gasket, a belt, and this union. This is going to be what we recommend. Most people are going to want to take the intake manifold off to do this job, which is the way we're going to be showing you how to do this. If you were to take this car to a dealer, they likely would not take the manifold off. I believe under warranty, it does not pay them to do so, and they don't have that option. So they're used to doing it without taking the manifold off. You have to work blind if you are going to do that. In terms of kits, we only have 2 kits available for these cars. They're the same but different in the sense that application is different. So water pumps are going to be different depending on the application. The main thing that you'll actually notice between these two is that the water pump on Golf R's, S3s, TTS models uses a different impeller. It actually has a different amount of fins. I presume this is actually for increased flow related to performance, but I'm not positive. Now let's talk about cost. Cost is going to vary. Obviously, if you're doing this job on your own, we have these kits put together. We can save you a few bucks. You can modify the kit, so if you didn't want to take the manifold off, you can take this out. You don't want to replace this belt, you just reuse the old one, you can take that out. You are going to pretty much need this stuff no matter what, because these are the parts you're going to replace. You can probably reuse your original water pump, although I wouldn't recommend it, in which case you would just want to replace the gasket here, which is included with your new water pump. But again, I wouldn't recommend it. For anybody not looking to do this job on your own, we're going to call some dealerships around the US so that you can get an idea of the range in price that you would pay for that type of job.
For VW service, press 2.
How you doing? I was hoping to get a price for a thermostat and water pump housing.
Okay, let me transfer you.
Parts, can you hold, please?
Yep.
Thanks.
You realize where we are right now, right? They transferred us to parts. Do we belong in parts? No, we don't. We don't belong in parts at all. I don't know. They transfer me over to you. Do you guys separate parts?
Yeah, I mean, parts and labor quotes are going to be separate.
Okay.
And you're looking for a price on a water pump? $380 thermostat housing and the water pump, and there's a union that goes behind that.
Okay, can you send me over to service, please?
Hello, thank you for calling Volkswagen. This is, how may I help you?
I just wanted to get a quote for labor to replace that.
VIN number.
Yes. Let me know when you're ready.
Sure, I was never born ready, but now I am.
Awesome. 3VW.
The labor comes out to be $11.40.
Okay. I appreciate your help.
Sir, thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Have a good day. $380 for parts. That's $1,520 total parts and labor. Obviously, the terrible experience of being bounced back and forth between parts and service. Oftentimes, something that most people don't know is a lot of dealerships are going to be understaffed in this way, and so they separate it because they don't have. It's a much more time-consuming process. Service has to go back to parts to get a price regardless. So even though we got obviously not an ideal experience there, that's probably not that uncommon depending on the dealership. Let's try another. I wanted to get a price on getting some work done.
One moment.
Together.
How you doing? I was hoping to get a price for you guys to do a thermostat and a water pump.
Hold on 1 second. Let me get you back to parts, so they can tell you how much the parts are. Okay.
Okay. But hey, can you give me a quote on labor first? Perfect.
Parts department. Okay, so the thermostat, I've got it in stock. It's going to come with the housing, the gasket, and a new mounting bolt. And it's going to run you $227. And the water pump, and it will run you $127.
Can you send me over to service so I can get a quote on labor, please?
Yeah, buddy. Hold on 1 second.
Thank you.
Yes, you have reached the Honda Volkswagen. Sorry, I cannot reach the phone right now. Leave a short, brief message.
My life.
Let me get your name and number and give you a call back. I'll have to go check with parts, or rather, I could send you back to parts.
No, I already got sent back to parts for that. I just need a quote on the labor. Hello?
Hello?
Yep.
Hey, I just checked with our Volkswagen tech, and roughly 4 hours.
4 hours?
At $110 an hour.
At $110 an hour.
Roughly.
So there you go. 4 hours at $110 an hour for 40, which brings a total there to $794. I'm surprised, frankly, that they're charging 4 hours. Seems like less than I would have expected. Now, an important thing I want to talk about on this. We have obviously a variety of prices that we have. The prices we're quoting at dealers, I suspect is going to be just a water pump swap out. So in that case, they're not going to be quoting an intake manifold, gasket, or the related items. They're not going to swap out the belt either, which oftentimes most people are not going to. We offer as part of our service kits more as a thing that people often want a kit that involves everything you could replace, which is why we would have something like that. For this reason, our shop actually charges more labor than what you would get quoted at that cheapest dealer, being the 4 hours. We actually charge 5 hours. This is because we're removing the manifold, we're cleaning everything completely. As you can see from the later part of our DIY video, you actually will notice the thermostat had already been replaced on this car, but the engine block was completely disgusting and covered in stuff. It's because when they do just a slap of a thermostat housing, they did not clean anything out. That's often going to be the experience I would expect most times you're gonna get when you just slap that thermostat housing, because you can't actually see what you're doing. You're doing it completely blind. Not only can you not get in there and clean everything properly, but oftentimes there's potential for another leak, which is why we tend to lean away from that. Again, people who are dealer techs are probably gonna have maybe an issue with us with that being our position, but that is our position. So our shop actually charges 5 hours for this job, and our total quoted from our shop was $861.30. That was total parts and labor for the job. Now, while you're in there, we generally would recommend doing a carbon cleaning depending on mileage. And usually what we do is tell the customer, hey, we'll inspect it when we get the manifold off for carbon cleaning, determine if this is something that needs to be done on this car or if it's something we should bypass, and then you can then do so. The reason why we would do this is because while you have the manifold off, a carbon clean is going to be significantly less expensive. So our shop is additional $190 to do a media blast on all the carbon stuff. That includes cleaning all that stuff up and making it beautiful again, using media as we would instead of scraping. Again, that's going to depend on mileage, but that is an option, and you're talking about a similar overlap in the job, which is why it would make sense since direct injection cars all have issues with carbon buildup. And here is what I suspect, based on the area we're calling, will be our most expensive quote.
Our sales staff is here to help you from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Okay, looking at about $16.60.
All right, $16.60. All right, and that's total parts and labor before tax. Okay, plus tax. Awesome. Thank you so much for your help.
Welcome.
Have a good day.
What did you want me to do? Bye.
There you go. So if we call around the U.S., ranges from about 1,700 to about 800. Pretty close. Pretty close. Dealerships often are going to charge you two things: a shop fee, which is going to be a blanket percentage across the board, usually with a cap of some kind, somewhere around $30 to $50 probably document and storage fee oftentimes is something they also have. So those are two fees that it'll tack on. You have a shop supplies fee, document and storage fee, and then obviously tax will be on top of that. So that's something that you're not likely to find at many independent shops that you will find at dealerships. So when you're price shopping, it's an important note to be aware of. You should ask about that whenever you're shopping. So there you have it. You see there's a wide range in pricing between places that you would go to. Some of those places were in very metro areas, some of them less metro areas. Prices are going to widely vary. You always should, if you're having somebody do work on your car, make sure you're price shopping to at least get an idea. Remember, you do want to find people who are specialists to make sure they're going to do the job properly. Now, if you're going to do it yourself, we're about to show you how to do so. We can save you money on the parts, and you should buy them from us because we're about to show you how to do it. Let's get into our install. Before we start the DIY, you can take a look here for all the tools you're going to need for the job. Now, to start with our DIY, we're going to start by just popping this engine cover off. We're going to be taking our manifold off. You may not have to do this if you're going to try to do it blind. I wouldn't suggest it if you don't know what you're doing, but it is something you can try. I'm going to start by removing this intake here and this to give us space to work over in this area. There is some fuel related components we are going to have to take off over here. And we're just going to take off all of our screws here, pull this housing out, and we want to take this air box completely out. We're going to take these guys off, pop this up. If you have an intake like on our all-track, this is going to be slightly different, but overall more or less the same process. You will have to kind of push down to get this to move backwards, and right now we're at a stopping point because we have to take the air box out. And we are going to take this spring clamp off. If you don't have a spring clamp pliers like this, we have them on our site, which we will link to them in the description. Just pop that hose back like that. And we are also going to take this secondary air hose off. So you're going to squeeze these two tabs, and then you're going to wiggle it. And just wiggle it back like that. We're now going to take this vacuum line off. So we got a 90-degree pick. We're just going to stick it in there and work it around a little bit. Like that. We should be able to just pull this air box straight up. It's just going to be sitting on some grommets. And up and out. Now we just slide this back and out. This is the intake duct on the front there. And now we have lots of room for activities. Now, I'm going to start draining the coolant just so that before we get to the point where we're taking the water pump out, we've gotten a bunch of the coolant out of the system. I'm going to actually remove the coolant temp sensor from this lower hose over here. So to take this off, all I'm going to do is pry this clip back like so. And then I'm just going to pull that coolant temp sensor up and out of there and leave it connected. But keep in mind, you're going to want to have a drain bucket underneath before you do this. Pull our coolant cap off, and that should allow that to kind of flow. Now we're going to take a look at this coolant pipe that runs across the front here, and we have a T30. We're going to break this loose so that we can get this pipe kind of loosened and out of the way. And now this other one on the side of the manifold here, also a T30. I'm using an absurdly long extension for this. Now you should see that this is loose here, which should be all you need to do to get everything kind of worked out of the place. I don't believe we're going to take this out all the way. Now I'm going to take this T30 on the valve cover. It holds this coolant pipe kind of down. I don't know that you 100% need to take this off, but I think it'll give us a little more room to work with to move things around because this is above the manifold here. And when we get it loose, it should help. And there's another one back here that also holds that on. All right, I'm gonna unplug this map sensor right here. And all you're gonna do is push down this tab and you kind of wiggle it backwards like that. And we can pop this out of the manifold. It just kind of clips in there. You just wiggle it up and out. That fuel line should be plenty out of the way now. Now I'm gonna unplug the throttle body and then I'm gonna loosen this hose. This is the boost pipe that goes up from the bottom to the throttle body. You can use either a flathead, as you see there, or a 7mm. 7mm on a electric ratchet. That's the easy way. And to unplug this, all you're gonna do is push down on the tab in the back and then slide it backwards. Can't really do this without blocking you, but I'm gonna do my best. There you go, like so. Now you have this clip that holds this wiring onto the manifold right here. All you're gonna do is take a flathead and you can kind of pry it while you pull. It just kind of bites onto the plastic and then it's off. This boost pipe screw right here, we're gonna remove now. And this probably doesn't need to come out, but it's gonna help give us a little bit of movement in this, which we're gonna pull these wires around so they're not hooked around it. Should give us a little more play. Okay, now we're looking right back here behind here, which is why we wanted a little bit of movement in this. And there's a screw that holds this to the manifold right here that straps this pipe here to the manifold. So we're gonna remove that. It's another T30 there. This is the point where you would like to have a magnet, and I'm a fool, so I'm gonna go get one. I don't have one ready. Easy thing to do, just to make sure you don't drop screws, is pull up with a magnet. All right, so now we're gonna remove these connectors. I'm just gonna slide this one back. Gotta be careful, don't pull too hard because you could yank that thing out. And then once you pull the tab out, you just push down on it like this and then pull it out. Next, we're gonna move on to these. Now these, you're gonna wiggle out of their slide. Slide them out like so, and the same thing on the bottom one. I'm actually gonna unplug this one before I mess with the bottom one. So same thing, just pull that tab and then pull that out like so. We got the bottom one. Last but not least, slide that out like so. I'm gonna pull on this tab on the bottom here. Let's try to spin it over so you can see it. You can see right there, push this tab down, and we got that out of the way. This wiring was too tight for me to pull out before, but now that I have those connectors out, you actually can just pop it out like so, and it's loose, and we can pull all this out of the way. All right, now we're gonna remove this connector right here, and I'm mostly doing this so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna push down with a pick on this tab to slide this thing out. I can't really do it with a pick. I need my fingers. So all I do is push down on the tab right here and then slide it out like so. All right, now we're gonna take off our oil filter housing, 32mm. And if you don't have one of these, we will link to it on our site where you can find one. Let's let this drip a bit. We'll flip it upside down here. Now I'm gonna put a rag in here just to make sure nothing falls down in that hole. This is a clean new rag, and we can take this connector off right here. Same deal as before. You can kind of just pry back on it. If you don't have picks, we will have them linked in the description below as well. And pop it back like that, and then you're just gonna push down on the tab and then pull it out. I'm gonna try to do it without blocking. I'm not doing it, I'm failing. Miserable failing. You can see just like that. We're gonna remove this 13mm here, and this, we have a ratcheting wrench, which will make our life a little bit easier. You could probably get a ratchet in the socket on here. If you were turning the right direction, it would also be helpful. I'm just saying. All right, we cracked that loose, and I am gonna leave that just sitting on there, and then we're gonna get the bottom bolt. So you can see here, the 13 that I just loosened is below here. If we track this shaft, that's the support for the intake manifold, all the way to the bottom, you're gonna find your triple square. Important to note, when you're dealing with this 10mm triple square here, that's at the bottom of this, the depth of this, it makes a huge difference because you only have a small window to work with, so you are gonna have to have the correct length. So I measured the length of this, you're looking at about 4.5 to 5.5 inches. 4.5 on the shorter end, 5.5 on the longer end is going to be the range you need to be in from the tip of your triple square to the end of the shaft of your extension. That is only about an inch that you have to work with, but like in most times in life, an inch makes a huge difference. And now we cracked that loose. I'm just gonna finger this out by hand, and then I'm gonna use a magnet once I get close to the end. Is it out? Yes. Oh yeah, she's out. And out. Without a magnet, you're probably gonna have a hard time with that. Just saying. Now I'm gonna finish taking the nut out here on the top side, pull that out, and then we should be able to just slide this bracket out. And we're just gonna leave that off to the side for now. It does have a wire hooked onto the edge of that. Okay, now we're gonna be using this thing. This is a large pick. We have small pick sets. These are a lot less common. Not required, but it's gonna make your life a lot easier, and we're gonna use this to get the boost pipe off the throttle body. All right, so to get this off, what we're gonna do is work this pick into our hose. Now what we're gonna do is work it around like that. The reason why the 90 works really well is because you can kind of work it around like that. You're gonna need a bigger one to actually make that function well. Now, anytime you're working with things like this, you have to be careful, because if you pry on it, you can put the tip of this through the hose, which you always gotta be careful with your tip. The front side of it is all off. I'm just gonna push on the back side just to see if we can get the back side to come off a little bit. You only have so much to work with here, but that should actually be enough for what we need. Now we're gonna take these two 10mm nuts off the edges. There are studs at either end of the manifold that have 10mm nuts on them, and we're gonna take them off. Our magnet's gonna come into play here too, just because if you don't have a magnet, you could drop those and you'll regret that. Okay, now we have our T30s, the rest of them, and pretty simple. We're gonna break them loose. Good news, they don't fall out because they're bolts. And then you have the other ones down low, which we can take a look here. Now for the lower manifold bolts, you're gonna go through this lower section in the manifold, and then you can just loosen it like you did the other ones. And you're doing that for the middle ones, you have to go through it, and then at the ends, it's kind of at the outer section. And this last one is kind of hidden, so we got a shot of it for you that you can see here. It's buried beneath this actuator underneath, and we just loosen that one. And now we're gonna take our magnet and grab each one of these out so we don't lose them when we take the manifold off. Now we're gonna remove this connector here and just slide that off to give us some extra space on top of the manifold. And now we're gonna take off these lines of this high pressure fuel pump, 17mm and a 21. If you don't have a 21, you can use an adjustable, because we're just holding that one. So we're gonna get that one on the top portion, that's our 21. And you are gonna wanna put a rag underneath of this to catch, because this is a high pressure line. It is gonna let some fuel out. So you gotta be careful with that. In the right way, there it is. And we just spin that down. You just let that ball pull down a little bit, and we'll get the lower portion of this. We have this line to deal with now. So you can actually remove this down underneath the manifold down here, or you can unclip it here and remove it back here. I would probably advise, for most people, maybe back here might be easiest. This is probably a matter of opinion. There is a joint here underneath that you can actually put a pick in and remove it there. This is really a matter of preference and wherever you feel like you're least likely to break this. All right, so this is the clip that we're gonna need to unclip, so that you can, if you are gonna remove it, you need to remove it here to allow you to take this out. And again, that's if you're gonna be removing it from here, in which case you would get your pick underneath there and pop this hose out from here. Okay, so this hose right here is the other place where you can take it off. So in that case, you would put a pick in here and try to get it in and pry it off there. And what you wanna do is get a pick in there and kind of work it around like that. So you can kind of work back and forth while you pull back on it, like so. All right, so now we're gonna take off the lower portion of this fuel line that comes down. You're not gonna be able to see a lot. We're gonna try to get a GoPro in there, but what I'm doing is I'm gonna stick this in and underneath this boost pipe, and then there's a hose here, and I'm gonna stick it in and then up to allow me to get to this. Now, if you don't have a stubby 17, I think you may be able to work around it in some ways by maybe trying to finagle it through the top here in some ways. It's a really bad angle, and I think that going from underneath is probably gonna be your best option. Hey, Future Paul here. What you're looking at here is a shot with the intake manifold off, and I'm threading off the nut that we just had you loosen. So this is going to be the best shot, and you're gonna come from underneath, again, going straight up, and that's the nut you have to loosen there. We may or may not have soaked our GoPro in gas this is what we do for you guys. All right, now we're gonna take this hard line out and should be able to feed it up and out. We are gonna proceed with pulling this guy back. We're still a little bit hung up on this hose here, so I'm gonna pull back like this, off, and then I'm gonna pull up to get out of this hose. I appear to be hung up still on our hose here, so I'm gonna work this around a little more while I'm pulling up on this. And there we go. Okay, so one thing we missed was this connector right here. This needs to slide off of this bracket. So we're gonna have to remove that and slide it out because it has a wire still over attached to the block. So we're gonna have to slide it off and release it from this bracket. So what you gotta do is get a hook kind of underneath there like that, and then you can just pop it forward and slide it off. And that's it, and it's off. Now you can break this coolant line loose and remove that, and this is just gonna give us the flexibility we need in this hard line. And now ready to come off. Let's make sure we got everything loose and connectors and wires and everything pulled away from everything. And we should be able to take our manifold out like so. Okay, so I did take this throttle body hose off just so we had a little more visibility here. So here you have your thermostat housing, water pumps on this side. All right, so now we're gonna start by getting some of our quick connects off. And we're gonna just stick like a screwdriver, or in our case, we're using this pick, and you're gonna pop that off. Now this is released from it being held in. Now you gotta kind of rock it like this to get the seal past where it mounts on. And you can see it kind of just pops loose like that. And there's one. Same thing down here. Now on this one, the clip is on the bottom side. So, okay, so I'm gonna use a small pick on that one because they use the same style clip, but because it's a smaller hose, the gap is a lot smaller. You can see it moving already. And I just hurt my finger. Really all you're trying to do is get it in there and then pull it down. And there we go. Pulled down. And same deal, just wiggle.
Is the pan in there?
Oop. I was not as prepared as I should have been with that coolant. Luckily Nathan was quick on the draw on that one.
I still think I missed.
You did miss, but it was helpful. You got something. It was better than just pouring straight in the floor. And last one at the bottom, popping it up. Same deal. That one's gonna let loose quite a bit. There we go, coolant everywhere. It's really not too bad. As long as, the key is we try to get some of it up now so that it doesn't become an ice skating rink while we're working. It's gonna happen. It's just a matter of how much of an ice skating rink it is. I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, oh, you should have had grit put in your floors so that you don't have that happen. And guess what? Joke's on you, we did have grit put in our floors. Still slippery. Right here is a cover that actually has the belt drive. We remove this cover here to start, and there are gonna be some Torx screws here. Break that guy loose. We have this wire, and we're gonna pop this thing loose. Should be able to just take like a screwdriver and pop it loose like that. It does have give us some room to get the lower bolt, which is located down here. As you can see here, we are now in it, and we're gonna break this thing loose. There we go. Look at that. All right, and that was underneath our water pump thermostat assembly. And now we can take our cover off. It's really hard to do with one hand. All right, and expose our belt. Okay, so if we were looking at it from the front of the car, this is the top and this is the bottom. And we're gonna have one bolt here, one bolt here, one bolt right there, one bolt over here, and then one over here. And that's gonna be removing right now, so let's go. Here's one. And two. 3. And these bottom 2, you're mostly gonna do by feel just because we can't really get a good shot at this. So what I'm gonna do is find them with my thumb. If I were a smarter person, I would have waited to take the top ones out last, but luckily I'm not smart. That should be it. Now we do have the belt on still. We haven't taken that off. And what we're gonna do is just walk this belt off with a screwdriver. Like so. We should be able to just pull this out. Make sure you get your bucket positioned where it's appropriate. Because you're gonna lose some more. One thing we also did not do yet is unplug this connector. So don't forget that. Don't just start yanking this thing out. You will destroy it. Also, if I was smart, I would have done this from the bottom before we started taking this off. Good news for you, I'm not smart. There we go. And we're out. Okay, so this is the belt. Now, this is something that you have to remove this intermediate shaft pulley on the back end here with this reverse thread bolt to actually get it out, because this is captive in here. So this is a one-time use bolt. You do have to replace that every time you use it. So if you are doing the belt, you do need to get that bolt. And then on the other side here, we have the union that this 100% of the time you should replace, and it has seals on both sides. So we're gonna yank that out. Okay, so here's our new one, here's our old one. We have to put our pump in, but what we want to talk about is the revision. So this is an H revision, this is an M. This has actually had, I think, 4 revisions since this part number, and so we can say this has probably been replaced before, but it's not the newest version. So the M is the most current version at this time. And you can take a look at the product page we have for this thermostat housing, where we have all the old numbers listed for that. Now we're going to assemble this. You see here the new pump comes with a gasket, so you don't have to worry about that. And all you got to do is drop it in place. And then we're going to snug all these down, and we will include the torque specs for these. All right, so this is just a cover for the fins here, and these, you're gonna see 2 empty holes here. I just wanna make sure you know, those are for this cover. Now again, ours was kind of crusty, so we're gonna clean it up, but you don't need to worry, you're gonna have 2 empty holes here once you reinstall. You can take a look here, we have the old gasket, which we're gonna pull off, and we're gonna chuck that into our bucket down there. And we are going to clean this area up. Now, one of the major benefits of having the manifold off is you can actually see everything here, and you're going to clean this up to the best of your ability. If you don't have the manifold off, you really can't see much, and frankly, you're probably not going to get much cleaned up. Okay, so we've cleaned up our area pretty good. We brake cleaned most of it. Last thing we want to do is make sure we clean up the mounting surface on the engine block. So we have some emery cloth here. Sandpaper actually could do okay, Scotch-Brite, remove that, and we're gonna scuff up this area to make sure we get a really clean mounting surface on the engine block, which we can take a look here. Okay, so here's our union, and it's gonna go in here. Now, you wanna make sure you clean out this hole pretty well, and make sure you don't have a gasket from the old union stuck. And we have the new union here. We've lubricated it with some of the coolant from one of our ports here, and this will help you kind of get it in there. And we're just going to sit it in there like so and get ready to install our water pump. Okay, so here is our new thermostat water pump assembly. This is a gasket here. I'm just going to rub a little bit of coolant on there, make sure that it gets a good seal across there. Okay, so we're going to go in with our thermostat assembly here, and the key is we want to get in and down and then get the back end here kicked up to where the union is. So if you don't get that in properly, you could end up getting a leak at that union. So that's a super important part of this. I think that union is not where I want it to be right now. There we go. I just flattened it out there. All right, so what I did is I kind of got the union seated in there, got it swung in place, kind of seated, and then just popped it sideways, because you want to make sure you get that union completely seated properly and square in its mounting place, because if it gets cockeyed at all, that's how we're going to end up with a leak at that union. Okay, so we've tightened all of our bolts down. We are going to include that torque spec here for you. And we are going to, don't forget to plug in your connector, which we're going to do right now. And you can do that from the bottom, or you can just do it from the top and just reach underneath. Okay, so now we have a 24mm socket. We're going to put that on a 1/2 inch, and we're going to get this on the crank because we're going to turn this to get our belt on the water pump. So we're going to leave that there, and let's go up top and check that out. So we have our belt tensioned in place here, and what we're going to do is get it on there and then turn the crank and allow it to feed the belt around, and then take a look at what that looks like. So as you can see, if you hold tension on the bottom side, it will pull it all up, and we're on. Now we just got to push it all the way down. All right, we're going to put our cover back on now, and kind of fish it in there and get it seated in place, and we'll put our 2 bolts in. Okay, so now we have our pump in, and we're going to install our hoses, and you're just going to do the opposite of what you did going off and just wiggle it. Now what you're going to want to do is get it clicked on, and then usually if it's not on all the way, you'll hear it click when you do reach it. If not, you should be able to just pull on it and make sure it's not coming off, in which case you should be good. Like that. If you leave it closed like that, you'll hear it click very audibly like that. Same deal with this one. Same thing there. And last thing we're going to do is swap our gasket over for an intake manifold. New and on. This has, if you look here, this little tab that hangs over here, there's a notch out of the manifold for it. So it only goes in one way. So this can't really be put in incorrectly. And if you are doing a carbon cleaning at this point, you want to try to clean these flaps up to the best of your ability. And same thing with the valves in the car. Now we're going to reinstall our intake. We should just be able to drop this in place, feed it past all of our components, and we'll be all set. Now, one thing I do want to note, we did clean our cylinder head off. You do want to clean up that mating surface, and that's important because you don't want to have a vacuum leak after you're done with this. One thing to mention, if you are having any difficulty with this seating down properly, you will want to make sure you inspect to make sure that there is nothing binding in between the manifold, and locate what may be getting hung up on. So that's important. All these connectors and everything that we had, actually those are our current issue, is they did not feed where they were supposed to, or I didn't feed them where I was supposed to, more importantly, and they are now hung up on the bottom here. So we're going to feed them around the front side of our bracket here. Then we're going to reinstall everything as we came out. We will give you a rapid fire torque spec as we're going back together. The lower intake manifold, triple square bracket bolt. The T30 Torx that hold the intake manifold on, 10mm that hold the intake manifold on, these T30 mounting screws, and these T30 mounting screws. So there we have it. We are back together. We have our coolant filled up, and what we've slowly done is top it up. You will see the level go down because obviously there's a lot of air in the system from all the coolant we drained out of there. Then what you're going to do is start your engine. Allow it to idle with the cap off the coolant bottle. What I do is allow it to run like that. As the coolant level drops and air will kind of circulate through there, you will continue to keep the bottle at the appropriate level. Once the cooling fans come on and run, you know you're good, and you can put the cap back on and tighten everything up, and you've completed your coolant burping. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it, and for more DIYs and videos just like this one, check out our YouTube channel. We have lots of them.